What's up, guys? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I interviewed Greg Everett, owner and founder of Catalyst Athletics. Greg is a former nationally competitive weightlifter. He's coached a national champion or two. The Catalyst female team has won the national championships for several years, and in general, he is just one of the most successful weightlifting coaches in the country in the last decade plus. I don't think there's a single person that's put out more content in the weightlifting community than Greg Everett, whether it be his video library, his 300 plus articles on his blog, the number of free programs. This dude's website is just absolutely insane. So it was just a pleasure to get to talk to him. I know you're going to enjoy this show. Before we get started, I'm doing a little experiment here. I'm going to invite any of you that are interested to call into a voicemail that I have set up and leave some questions. So then I'm going to play back your question on the podcast, and I'm either going to answer the question myself or I'm going to get one of my guests to help me answer those questions. If you're interested, the number is 801-449-0503. That's 801-449-0503. And also, if you haven't already done so, if you're a fan of this podcast and you listen regularly, please head to iTunes, leave me a review. I appreciate it. What's up, everyone? I'm here with Greg Everett, the owner of Catalyst Athletics. Greg, you're a super busy guy. Thank you so much for making some time to do this, man.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off here. You are, without a doubt, one of the most successful individuals. Your company is one of the most successful companies in the weightlifting world in history. You've written seven books. Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay. I think I found that somewhere. You've written about 7 books, competed personally at a national level, coached national champions. Your women's team, I know, has won for several years. And you put out consistently more content than any person in the weightlifting space. And I think you have kind of an atypical way of getting there. Can you kind of talk about and I know this might be a curveball, but can you talk about what your life was like as a kid, what you were kind of like, and maybe a little bit about your family and like how you grew up?
Sure. I can try to distill that to some reasonably digestible chunk of information.
Yes. I'm usually better about that, man.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, about 45 minutes south of San Francisco. Had two parents who were very well educated, divorced at, I think I was 5. So like my dad had a master's from MIT and a PhD from Stanford. My mom had a master's from Stanford. My stepmom, I think, had a master's from Stanford. So I was the dipshit who went to Chico State.
Uh-huh. And were they physicists? Did I hear that correctly?
My dad's MIT master's was in aeronautics and astronautics. And then his PhD was basically, he actually created a field for his PhD at Stanford where he, for 30 plus years, he basically worked. Well, he worked for Lockheed, he worked for NASA briefly, and then for most of his career, he worked basically doing consultation primarily with like the Air Force, sometimes the Navy, on things like radar placement. So, he was all over the world, from Alaska to Saudi Arabia and, places like that when I was a kid. So,
right.
Yeah, it's something super nerdy that I don't entirely understand.
You just throw that in the bucket of rocket science.
Yeah, it's just science beyond my paltry abilities, right, is what I know. I just remember as a kid, like seeing him pull out a napkin or something at a restaurant and like do a math problem to explain something and just going, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. So I think I had a pretty good foundation there in terms of, I don't remember ever being like explicitly encouraged when it came to education and things like that. I think it was just kind of built in naturally. Like that was sort of the expectation. Although I was, my older sister actually has a master's too from Santa Clara University, which is considerably better than Chico State. Although no other member of my family went to a school that was ever nominated Party School of the Year by Playboy magazine. So I have that distinction.
That's badass.
So yeah, I'm like the least educated guy in my family with a measly little bachelor's degree in English of all things, which was basically like I figured that was the quickest, easiest way I could get through college and get a degree and just move on with my life because I hated school my whole life. So I mean, I was into pretty much every sport imaginable from, the team sports. I played all the standard team sports, baseball, basketball, soccer, blah, blah. But more skateboarding was really big for me for a number of years. And biking, that kind of stuff, kind of the more individual sport, non-mainstream sort of thing. Skateboarding was somewhat less mainstream at that time, back in the 80s and early 90s. But so I definitely had a lot of like experimentation with different things and was always very interested in training in general and, strength training specifically. So that always kind of played a part no matter what I was actually doing competitively or primarily at any given time. Not a lot of skaters are big strength trainers, but I was that weird guy. Shit. I mean, I don't know what else. I mean, I got into this early weightlifting. I kind of was self-taught in high school. So that would have been, age 15 or so. But, my high school weight room was this tiny little closet in the basketball gym with, a universal machine and two bench press stations and a power rack that the pin, one of the pins was so bent you couldn't get it out of the rack. So there wasn't a lot of weightlifting opportunity going on. And of course, years and years later, I found out that I lived 45 minutes away from Jim Schmidt's up in South San Francisco. But this was, pre-internet days, which I know is hard for a lot of people to even remember or imagine what that was like. But you couldn't just like pop on there and say, "Where's a weightlifting gym near me?" And so I wasn't able to really get into that as much as I wish I had been able to. I could have been slightly better than mediocre, I think, if I got serious at the age of 15 instead of much later. But ended up in Chico. Was working on an ambulance and doing that whole thing and just really in a strange way ran into Rob Wolf, who had just moved back from Seattle after helping open the very first CrossFit affiliate gym of all time. He and Dave Warner and Nick Nibbler up there were actually the ones who gave the Glassmans the idea to have affiliate gyms. I don't think their finder's fee has come yet, but so he had just moved down after that and was sharing space with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym, a guy named John Frankel. And so just roundabout way kind of ran into them, met them, and started training there. And Rob and his now wife, Nikki, asked me to partner up with them. So I had been a personal trainer since I was 18. So I'd kind of had my foot in that door a little bit, but wasn't really happy with, that industry, as a lot of people can understand, I'm sure. So that was kind of a new opportunity for me to get into a gym where I could actually do the kind of things that I wanted to do. So that was a really good opportunity for me.
That's awesome, man. I mean, looking at your website and just taking into account everything that you accomplished over the last, when did you start Catalyst? It's been over 10 years?
2006. So and we started the performance menu in 2005. And then we started the gym in Chico in 2003.
So I assume it takes a lot of, and even hearing you talk on different things and in your writing, you're a super passionate guy. And to create the kind of thing that you've created, I mean, your website is just so fucking packed full of content. It's an enormous resource. It takes a lot of drive and motivation to create something like that. Is that just something that's always been in you, or what's kind of behind that? What has driven you to continue working so hard over the years?
That's a good question. I don't really know what exactly I could attribute that to. I mean, it's not something that I recall ever having like a conscious thought about necessarily early on. But it's the idea of work in general has always been very appealing to me. Like, I mean, uh, I was finding jobs, at the age of 9, 10, doing shit like painting red fire curbs and, probably getting like $3 for a day or, something ridiculous like that. I'd paper route. I actually dropped out of high school my sophomore year so I could work full time and did this adult education thing where I was actually teaching my geometry teacher a couple things because she had no idea what she was talking about. So that idea of work and like actually earning things and contributing something has always been very important to me. And I have a really, really difficult time understanding the mindset of so many people kind of in my generation and the ones, subsequent to it who have this like really disgusting sense of entitlement and this idea that the world owes them something and they don't need to actually work and they just kind of want this instant gratification. And and it's for, like when we tried to hire people for Catalyst at various times, for the gym, for example, the people that would contact us, it was unreal. And it's like, what's wrong with you? Why on earth would I give you a job? Mm-hmm. And so that always drove me nuts. So I think I just have this weird compulsion to work hard as much as possible. And I think that's just been a fortunate that I had that, because otherwise Catalyst wouldn't have been able to become what it is, because it was, I had to do everything myself. I didn't have the money to, I couldn't pay a web designer. I couldn't pay an editor for books. I couldn't pay people to write for us. All these things, I just had to figure out how to do it. And so I think I got really lucky in that sense where I actually, for whatever reason, had that particular ambition and that willingness to just work really hard, really fast all the time.
Right. So I have a two-parter here for you. So you're a parent now. So you're talking about entitlement. How do you, as a parent, and you're super successful, you, I assume, could give your kids just about anything they ask for. How do you marry, giving your kids a comfortable lifestyle and giving them what they want with, not allowing them to become entitled?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's hard, because we are successful. We do financially have the ability to pretty much, be comfortable and provide our daughter with just about anything she could possibly want or need. So it's a constant struggle, definitely deciding, what's reasonable to give her, what we need to actually make her earn in various ways, whether that is, actually earning her, her own money, or, saying, okay, well, we'll get you this if you, do these tasks, whatever, or, you need to maintain these grades, you need to do these chores, blah, blah, blah. But really trying to, make her understand the value of money, which is hard to do when you seem to have there's no end. Like, people who grow up not having money, you don't have to teach them the value of money. They get it. They have to work hard. They see their parents working 2-3 jobs just to, buy them food and, a new pair of shoes every 3 years. And so it's something you don't have to go out of your way to do. Whereas in our situation now, you have to actually like actively educate someone. And, like my parents growing up, we definitely were not rich, but we were, there, I never felt any threat of not having the money to survive.
Right.
But at the same time, I think my parents both were very good at teaching me the value of money and how to manage money and the importance of living conservatively and not, like, well, I've got this money, so I should go buy a super nice car and then, struggle to make the payments and, pay for gas and things like that. It was always a very, wise, conservative sort of approach where you're constantly focused on, providing for your future, providing for your kids, ensuring that you don't get yourself, dig yourself into a big hole that you can't get out of. And so that's the kind of thing that we really try to instill in our daughter, is that, this stuff comes and goes, and you need to develop the kind of the abilities to work for what you have, to earn it, and to understand that it can be taken away at any moment. Our house could burn down, our insurance policy could have an error in it, the stock market could crash, and we'd be fucked. Mm-hmm. So, always kind of keeping that in mind, that you do have to earn what you've got, and understanding, being, always wanting to take care of what you have, and really appreciate it. And so it's a day-to-day thing. I don't have any really good system for it necessarily. It's just kind of that constant reminder.
Right. I'm not sure if you've heard of the author, the psychologist Brene Brown, but she wrote a book, and she's got a lot in there about parenting, and she talks about it as it's got to just be a constant. You've got to be engaged, right? And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about. It's a constant process. There's no right answer, because every family, every individual is different, but you just have to stay engaged with your kids. So, that's good to hear you say, man. I'm taking notes over here for my future kids. Appreciate that.
And the main thing is that if a kid learns early on, and it's constantly reinforced that they need to earn what they have, they need to contribute to the world, and they need to respect other people, then you're going to be pretty set. Mm-hmm. If you can really nail those things down, then your kid's going to turn out to be a decent human being.
Nice. Easier said than done sometimes, I'm sure.
Absolutely, 100%.
So I want to kind of get into coaching, and I was looking up a very old interview that someone did of you, I think after you wrote one of your books, and in there you were talking about kind of your experience as a kid, and you talked about, and it was about you overanalyzing yourself, and you said you felt separate and disconnected from your peers, and that's something that I definitely suffered as a kid, an adolescent, in my early 20s, big time, and something I definitely continue to deal with occasionally, of just being kind of hypercritical of myself, or overanalyzing situations, and it gets in the way of my relationship with myself 100%, but also how I communicate with others. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that to some extent. So I'm wondering, what was your process? What was the process for you, kind of getting through that, and how do you prevent yourself from dealing with that now?
Man, I don't know. And again, this is one of those things where I don't necessarily have a conscious process for this stuff. And the reality is that I wouldn't say that I'm really over that kind of thing. I mean, I am hypercritical. I'm very self-conscious. I'm not a super, extroverted, confident person. I mean, like, doing seminars is a perfect example of this, where people are like, oh, doing seminars must be the coolest thing. You get to, all these people want to talk to you. And I'm like, I fucking hate it. Mm-hmm. And, don't feel bad, people who come to my seminars. Like, I love it. Like, I love being able to do it. But, like, no joke, the, 2 to 3 weeks leading into every seminar, I'm like just constant, low grade anxiety.
Right.
Thinking about it. Like, it's really hard for me to get up and speak in front of a bunch of people, and do that kind of thing, because 90% of the time I'm just kind of thinking in my head, like, who the fuck do I think I am? Like, what
yeah.
what gives me the the qualifications to do this, and that sort of thing. And consciously I understand that I do have the wherewithal to help people and get them better and that sort of thing. And I think that's, the public record has demonstrated that at least reasonably well. But at the same time, as I'm sure you understand, is you are constantly asking yourself, or or kind of wondering what, whether or not you really are as good as people think you are. Not necessarily as good as you think you are, but as good as people think you are. And can you live up to those expectations and that sort of thing? And so I think the way I kind of deal with that primarily is that I have a constant need to get better and to learn more and to do anything I can to kind of stay on top of whatever I'm doing, rather than kind of resting on my laurels. And, for example, okay, well, our women's team won the national championship this year, so I'm good. Now I know everything. I can just kind of sit back and coast.
Right.
For me, it's the exact opposite. It's like, oh shit, like we won a national championship, so now the expectations are even higher. What am I going to do to get better and to kind of make sure that I stay in this position and keep moving forward? So yeah, I basically just made it sound like my job is completely fucking horrible, but I do actually like it.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. I ask a similar question to that every now and then, because I like to remind myself and also listeners that these successful people like yourself that I'm interviewing, they have the same kind of fears and anxieties as everyone else, right? No one is out there pushing their limits without that kind of thing. So it's refreshing to hear that someone as successful as you deals with all of the same kind of stuff that we do. It's awesome. That is something that I can completely relate to. Last year, before one of our camps, I had a legitimate panic attack. I was so unprepared and hungover, and I had a fucking terrible panic attack. And this year leading up to our camp, it was much bigger this year, much more hyped up. And I had this talk that I was giving for the first time, and I was shitting my pants. And so I prepared. I read the talk to 4 or 5 different people. I had note cards, and I just went through it day after day after day. And I got up there, and I did better than I really had even imagined I could do. So, I think part of being successful is pushing yourself and doing those types of things despite how you feel inside. It just doesn't ever go away.
Yeah. Well, and at least, for example, like this will be the 11th year that I've done these seminars. So that you can definitely look back on that and say, okay, well, I've survived for 10 plus years doing this. I haven't died yet. I haven't been like horribly embarrassed, or, people haven't written me off and saying, oh, he's full of shit, we're not going to come to these seminars anymore. And so that definitely helps, kind of accumulating that experience. But yeah, you still go through basically the same thing every time.
Right.
So to all you who want to start doing seminars, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So getting back to, I said earlier that you're without a doubt, if there's anyone that's putting out more content on weightlifting, I don't know who it is. And in general, there's just so much fucking information out there and education for weightlifters. How would you recommend people go about sifting through sifting through all of that information, and how do they prevent too much information from coming in?
Oh, it's actually really, really simple, and I can't believe more people haven't figured this out, but you just go to catalystathletics.com and never leave.
Nice. Perfect.
In reality, it is. It's an overwhelming amount of information, and the internet is fantastic in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways it's a huge detriment. Because there is this basically no barrier to entry. Anyone can get online and say whatever they want, whether or not it's correct or true, whether or not they have the actual qualifications to be saying those things. And it's tough for people to be able to kind of distinguish people who do know what they're talking about from people who just have good marketing. Mm-hmm. And even in weightlifting specifically, there are a lot of really good examples of this, where you have people out there who are very successful despite the fact that they have no clue what they're talking about, have no experience. And these things are actually really easy to find. I mean, it's all public record. But, they've got flashy marketing, and they know how to, all these little tricks, or, you create a sense of scarcity. We only have 4 spots for this program. And, all these things that, make people buy despite their more rational brain. And so I think a lot of the actual experts, guys who have been coaching for 30 years, for example, and have all these successes, kind of get forgotten and left behind, because primarily I think they're not interested in engaging in that kind of stuff. They don't want to be marketers. They're coaches. They don't want to promote themselves. They just want to coach. And yeah, they want to help people. But if it's going to require that they invest 30 hours a week into learning how to craft the perfect tweet and, silly stuff like that, then they're not going to do it. And I kind of ride that fence where I hate doing that stuff. I don't want to do it, but I have to in order for Catalyst Athletics to survive in this new market of everybody in the world having something to sell, something to say, and that sort of thing. But really what it comes down to is, I used to kind of say, well, these poor people, they're overwhelmed by information, and, how are they supposed to know who to trust? And now I kind of don't feel that way anymore. I feel like if you're following the wrong person or listening to bad advice, at this point, it's your own fault. Because you do have access to the internet. You have access to a lot of information. You can do your homework on these people. And so an easy way to do that is to look up. So for weightlifting specifically, weightlifting is an extremely objective sport. You can't really argue about whether or not someone is better than someone else. It's kind of right there numerically. And yeah, there's some gray area, because success does depend to some extent on the athletes a coach has the opportunity to work with. For example, you could have the greatest coach in the world, drop him in Siberia. He's not going to produce many world-class athletes. You could have a mediocre coach working with a bunch of, juiced up athletes in a very high population center, and all of a sudden he's going to have a lot of success. So there is that. But in general, go to USA Weightlifting or, whatever, if you're outside of the U.S., whatever your national governing body is, and look up competition results. At least on start lists, coaches are always listed with their athletes, or the teams are listed with their athletes. And you can see right there, has this coach produced any good lifters? And in a lot of cases, I'm not going to name names, but there are a lot of people out there who are purporting to be experts, who are, literally calling themselves world-class weightlifting coaches, who have never coached a single competitive weightlifter in their lives. That's a huge problem. Now, and people kind of get butthurt about this sort of thing sometimes, like, well, that person is helping people. Okay, that's fine. Help people, but don't be disingenuous about your qualifications. Those things, you can do both. You can be honest about who you are, what you've done, what you haven't done, and still help people, still offer, hey, here's what I think is going to help you. Try it out. If it doesn't work, that's fine.
Right.
But if you approach it like, I'm a world-class weightlifting coach, and therefore, what I'm telling you is definitely correct, and it's better than what everyone else is saying, that's just plain bullshit. And so for the people out there who are looking for information, I feel like it is your responsibility to kind of do your background checks, do your due diligence, and not get fooled by people who are just trying to, lighten your pockets any way they can before everyone figures out that they're full of shit. So go to USA Weightlifting, look up competition results. Everyone complains about how difficult the USA Weightlifting site is to navigate. It's not that hard. You can just Google, 2016 USAW National Championships. It'll come right up. So don't make excuses. Just go do it.
Love it. What about people in small towns, or just in a city that doesn't have a well recognized coach? What should they do, and when is it how would you recommend people decide like when to get onto an online program?
Yeah, that's a tough thing, because as much as weightlifting has grown in the past couple of years, it's still relatively inaccessible compared to most sports. Um, I think there's a couple things to consider. Number one, how serious are you about being a weightlifter? In other words, do you want to be a competitive weightlifter and try to make a world championship team? If that's the case, you need to move. You need to find a good coach and move there, period. Um, and I think that that's a level of commitment that people will often say they have, but their actions will not demonstrate that. So like, oh, well, I'm 19, 20 years old. I'm single. I have no attachments. I don't have an existing career, but I'm not willing to move to do this, to make an Olympic team.
Right.
Well, then you're not actually that committed. Now, if you're just someone who wants to lift recreationally, but you want better help, then you have a lot of options. You can do online programs. You can, get books, go, use websites, use YouTube, all these things to kind of teach yourself. And you can find, it's a lot easier to find a CrossFit gym that at least has weightlifting equipment. It may not have good coaching, but at least it has the equipment that you can use. So you're not limited in that respect. And it may have a coach who's kind of a beginning, relatively inexperienced coach, but if you kind of go into it as a beginner, also as an athlete, you two can kind of work together and develop together rather than kind of having the expectation that this person is just going to give you all the answers. And a coach at that level, I think the smart ones will be very willing to admit like, hey, I don't know everything. I'm pretty new to this. I'm still learning. So let's put our heads together and figure this stuff out. And they will be okay with that lifter getting advice from other sources and that sort of thing, because that's going to help that coach learn too. So I think a red flag with a beginning coach is ones who will not allow people to go elsewhere for information and kind of have that expectation where these people should trust them 100%. Implicitly with everything, even though they don't have the experience, even when the lifters are more experienced than the coach. That's a huge red flag for me. Mm-hmm. So really, I think you just have to decide, make an assessment. What is your actual level of commitment? What are your goals? And depending on those things, then an online program is perfectly fine. You know what I mean? You can, there's programs online you can get for free. We have a bunch of them for free. Some of them are paid, but it's, $10 a month to access them all. So it's not exactly, you don't have to, take out a second mortgage on your house to afford them or anything. So there are a lot of options out there for people who do not need a world-class coach, in their presence every single day.
What have you guys learned about coaching online? Technique, communication, et cetera. What have been some of the things that you've learned over time?
It's tough. It's tough to do well, I should say.
Right.
For a long time, I just refused to do it. I don't take online clients. Well, I shouldn't say for a long time. I still don't take online clients. But what's changed now since we moved and closed the commercial gym is that some of my, national level lifters are not here. And so, at least temporarily, we're doing everything, via email, text, video, that sort of thing. And it is definitely far more difficult. There's no question that being able to coach someone in person is far more effective, because there are so many things that kind of need to be adjusted day to day, set to set even. And there's a big difference between, getting a text from someone saying, everything was fine in my workout today, I made all my lifts, mm-hmm. versus seeing them take every single set and seeing the speed of the bar, seeing the accuracy, seeing, things like the way they come into the gym and how they tie their shoes.
Right.
All those things tell you, how is this person recovering? How, what's this person's attitude like? All these things that go into, the most effective training possible. And you can't get that remotely. So, but again, it's a matter of what's accessible, what your options are. And if you are, stuck in Butt Flats, Iowa with no coach for 300 miles, it is a far better option to work with a good coach remotely than to just be stuck in your basement, trying to guess your way through this stuff. So I don't want to make it sound like, online coaching is just terrible and it's pointless. No, it can be very effective, but it will never be as effective as, live coaching.
I couldn't agree more. Even as something as simple as the exchange of energy, right? Just the ability
Right.
to be in, like, if you're in front of a coach, you're naturally just going to go harder. You're going to be more focused, etc. It's just an
Absolutely.
invaluable thing to have. But I think it's very difficult when you have, you might have the opportunity to work with a legitimately world-class coach online, but your local coach, doesn't have any accolades or credibility per se. So I think it can be a difficult decision for a lot of people. I think it is a difficult decision for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think you can, in that kind of situation, you can definitely go with a somewhat hybrid approach where you may be getting programming from, a very, high caliber coach who's not local, and then working locally with a kind of a less experienced coach, but someone who can still kind of provide, like you said, that sort of energy and that attention to you day to day, and provide you a little bit more accountability. And they can provide some feedback, especially if that local coach is willing to work with the remote coach, so the remote coach can say, hey, this is what I'm looking for in this workout. And if he or she is moving a little too slowly, I want these weights to be reduced by 5%, whatever the case is. And then you can have actually like a really good system. The trick is finding a local coach who's willing to kind of cede that sort of authority. And again, though, if someone who is less experienced than another coach is kind of unwilling to do that, then that's kind of a red flag to me.
Mm-hmm. You were a coach before before kind of social media blew up. How do you think social media affects and even stunts a coach's development?
Ooh, I can't say I'm a big fan of the social mediums. They kind of drive me fucking bananas. By the way, I hope this show is rated explicit.
Yeah. It was before this, so you're good.
All right. I didn't totally ruin your pristine record. How does it stunt a coach's growth? I think the biggest problem for a coach is that it provides such a huge distraction if you're not careful, where, instead of being totally focused on your own lifters, your own program, that sort of thing, it's very easy to be looking into all these different people's lives and say, oh, what is this? What did she snatch today? Or, what kind of weird stuff are, these guys doing over here? And so you kind of lose that focus and that kind of dedication to what you are doing. And that really detracts from it. It detracts from, I think, your ambition and your motivation to a large extent. And it makes it more difficult to do a good job with your own lifters. And I think that's very true for the lifters too, is people are constantly looking at what their competition is doing. And the reality is that you cannot change what your competition is doing in training. You have zero control over that. The only thing you have control over is what you're doing in the gym. And that goes for coaches too. And so to even put any time and energy into looking at what your competition is doing, to worry about what your competition is doing, is just detracting from your ability to improve and progress. This was pre-social media days. I remember when Amy was still competing. I remember nights where we would come home from the gym, and the first thing she would do is get on the computer and go look up and see what Natalie Wolfhook and Carissa Gordon were doing, because those were her two biggest competitors. Mm-hmm. And I would just beg her, like, please just stop looking at this stuff, because all it's doing is, you could have had the greatest day in training.
Right.
And then you come home and you're all happy, you're proud, you're motivated. You come home and, Natalie did, very slightly better than you. And all of a sudden your whole world is destroyed and you hate weightlifting. And, you just lost all your motivation. It's just nonsense. And so like we will specifically instruct our athletes, especially as we're getting closer and closer to competition, like get off of fucking Instagram. You need to stop looking at what people are doing. Stop following these people. Unfollow everybody. Go on there to post something if you want. Don't even post your biggest lifts. It's just bulletin board material for your competition. And so it's you have to really, it can be a great tool in a lot of ways, but you really have to be careful and know how to use it to your advantage rather than allowing it to create a disadvantage to you and an advantage to your competition.
Right. I love how you put that at the end. Use it more as a proactive way of, maybe preaching what you're all about or inspiring people or entertaining people, whatever it is that you do. But if you're not disciplined enough to go on there and not spend the next half hour 6 times a day looking at what everybody else is doing, it can be just a terrible thing. On the flip side, and I forever have operated only from that stance without seeing any of the positive. And I'm, from talking to a couple people similar to us, one thing that's been helpful to me is, if I find myself like really dreading like posting something, then what I'm trying to post is really worthless, right? And so the way to think about it is for me to only post things that I find really inspiring or that will provide some form of value for people. And if I think about it from that point of view, then I can actually get excited about social media, and I want to engage with people, that are commenting and vice versa. But when I'm not disciplined and I allow myself just to go on there with no purpose or intention, it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah. And that I 100% agree. I think it provides just one more channel of education. And so, Catalyst Athletics, if you look at it, that's the primary motivators that, years ago, there was just nothing out there. And I wanted to provide these resources for people and help educate people and give them this information. And so social media to me is exactly that. I like posting videos of our lifters doing things, posting photos of our lifters, that sort of thing, because you can learn from it. And I like posting, videos and text or whatever, teaching about certain things. That's all we post, really. We don't repost other, weird stuff or like, silly memes and all these things, because that to me is just not, you can go elsewhere for that. And I don't want to really take part in that personally. Like, right. I got other things I'd rather be putting my energy into.
Absolutely. I think you wrote an article recently on this. I didn't get a chance to read it, but on all the recent doping violations, I mean, some of the best weightlifters in the entire world were popped recently from, I think, the 2012 Olympics.
2008, 2012,
yeah.
And the 2015 Worlds, yeah.
Right. So what do you make of all of this, and what implications does this have for the future of weightlifting?
Oh, man. Well, I kind of see this as vindication for a lot of us who for years have been trying to explain to people that the best lifters in the world are on drugs. And it was always seen as, wow, you Americans are just bitter and you're pissed off because you suck, and these guys are all so much better and their coaches are so much better, and they have all this secret knowledge about programming and technique that you guys just don't understand, and it's just all bullshit. These are people who say that stuff are the ones who have zero experience in the sport. They don't know any of these foreign lifters or coaches. Maybe they went to a seminar to hump their leg for 6 hours, but that's as close as they've gotten. Like, oh yeah, I'll pay you $300 if I can just touch you. And the reality is that, I've talked to a lot of these lifters. I've talked to a lot of these coaches, and what they do is really not any different. The difference is drugs, better recruiting, a larger and deeper talent pool to recruit from, incentivization to keep people in the sport long term so they can develop to their peak. All these different things contribute to that huge disparity between the US, uh, the UK, Australia, these, Canada, these countries who are by and large, unquote, quote unquote, clean countries, right? Yes, there are people who use drugs in the US more so now that, in recent years, but it's not a systematic doping situation where we actually have an internal drug testing system that exists to test our lifters positive, to catch them, versus an internal drug testing system that exists to make sure that they're not sending a lifter to a competition who could test positive. There's a huge difference between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't China and Russia and all these countries, they don't pop their own lifters and ban their own lifters, right?
Right.
Here we do. If you get caught, you're banned, period. And so it was like, in years past, you would have, 3 positives at the Worlds or something silly like that. Like, oh yeah, we got them. We got the 3 people at the Worlds who were on drugs. And it was just such nonsense. And it was so frustrating to be in that position where if you even talked about it, it was, oh, it's just sour grapes. You're just a fucking crybaby. And now it's like, well, you know what? Look what happened. All these people that you said were just so much better and they had all these crazy tricks up their sleeve, you know what? They were on drugs like everybody else. And it's, I think the really good thing is now that you have this retroactive testing, I think that's going to have more of a positive effect on getting drugs out of the sport to a greater degree than anything else, because you constantly have that threat looming over your head that, well, they may not be able to detect what I'm on now, but in a few years, who knows what they can do.
Right. Literally, no one knows.
Right. But part of the problem, too, with the whole drug issue and the reason why it's so hard to get rid of is that drug use in countries outside of the U.S. is not this stigmatized, amoral, terrible thing that it is in the U.S. In the U.S., drugs are so frowned upon, at least publicly. I mean, a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, I don't give a shit. I just want to see, 8,000 home runs in a season, and I want to see 300-pound guys who can run the 40 in 2 seconds flat. Like people don't want to see, the NFL with a bunch of 180-pound, offensive linemen. That's boring. But these other countries, a lot of times, even if their lifters get popped, it's not a disgrace. Like there really isn't any downside to it. It's not like they become homeless and everybody hates them and they get stripped of all their glory.
Right.
It's kind of like, yeah, he's on drugs. Everyone knows it. Who gives a shit?
Right.
He won the world championships or he broke a world record, so we don't care.
Right.
And so that mindset makes cleaning up the sport virtually impossible. I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, you have a country like Iran who's got like so much money that they'll pay, $500,000 a year in fines just to stay active, so they can continue competing and stuff like that. So it's like, how do you get around that? So I think this is a good step. I don't think the sport's ever going to be totally clean, but I think in the next few years, you're going to see American lifters, British lifters, Canadian lifters placing higher and higher and higher in competition, because you're going to have fewer lifters coming from these other countries, and you're going to have the ones who are coming relatively low performances because they're going to have to get off the drugs farther out from competition, and so they're going to have more of a performance decrease. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in this quad. I think we definitely you're going to see a lot of that gap close between us and the rest of the world.
Amen. My another one of my worries is that if it takes, they had this new technique. I honestly I'm almost completely ignorant as to what kind of new technology they came up with, but they came up with something that allowed them to go back 8 years, right? But the people that won in 2008, they're already made, right? They've had successful careers. A lot of them, I'm sure, leveraged that for other things in careers outside of weightlifting. And by that time, if you get popped 8 years down the line, it doesn't have near the implications as it might if you get popped a couple weeks later, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's just another thing that might prevent or kind of stifle fear in people.
Yeah, that's true. And the flip side of that is the people who, who move up in the rankings because of those positives, they're screwed too. 8 years ago, they could have gotten some endorsements. They could have gotten some money. They could have gotten recognition. And now no one gives a shit.
Right.
It's too late. So that's really sad to see, knowing that these lifters are so much better than it appears they are. And that's the thing people forget is you see, this kind of idea that these countries have all this top secret knowledge and they know all these things that we don't. We've had some of these great foreign, coaches come to the U.S. and coach our lifters, and they haven't been able to accomplish anything more than any of the American coaches.
Right.
It's not an issue of coaching. It's not an issue of athletes not being good. It's an issue of circumstances, plain and simple. And I think people just don't want to believe that it's that simple.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Okay, let's talk a little bit of business and then wrap it up. What has been your biggest surprise about running the gym, the online business, et cetera? What one of or multiple of the biggest surprises?
That's interesting. I don't even know. I actually, you know what? I take that back. One of the things that surprises me continually is I see this like there's no pattern that I can discern on people's willingness or unwillingness to spend money on things. For example, my book, which the newest edition is just under 600 pages at 8.5 by 11, overwhelmingly text instead of photos. It's a ton of information. I sell that for $45 in print. Mm-hmm. The previous edition was only $35 in print. There are people who will sell, 80 to 100 page ebooks for like $70 or $80. Mm-hmm. And we will have people complain about the price of my book. And I don't understand the thought process there.
Right.
And so there's this like weird thing where it's like if a product is backed up by good marketing, it can be so overpriced and underwhelming in terms of content and everybody's okay with it. Versus, my marketing strategy is like, here, I wrote a book. You might like it. If you don't want it, then fuck off. If you want it, please buy it. Thank you. And it's like, and then you get, this is fucking ridiculous. $45 for this book. And I have to pay shipping too. And why do you guys charge so much for shipping? Like as if we're the ones personally delivering it and charging, like, oh yeah, we dictate the prices that the, United States Postal Service gives you. It's just very bizarre to me. And I think it's very surprising to me continually how certain individuals are able to create these, online personas that are so inaccurate and then just make money hand over fist based on it. When you get offline and, within, say, the weightlifting community, every single person in the weightlifting community knows that person's a fraud, has never done anything. The things that they're saying are not just like incorrect, but like mind-blowingly bizarre and just stupid, and people eat it up, and they can't pay them fast enough. And then you have, a really great coach who's not a good marketer, providing seminars or a book or whatever. And I mean, they can't make a sale to save their life. So it's very strange. Maybe those aren't surprises so much as frustrations.
Right. What do you have any advice for, the coach out there that, they treat they treat coaching as a craft, and they're trying to be the very best that they can be to try to navigate those issues?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the best course of action is to stay that course. Focus on your craft. Focus on what you are best at, which is coaching. Focus on producing athletes and producing good content. And you may not make the most money, but you will make some money, because there is a small subset of the world who actually appreciates good content and is willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. They're the smaller of the groups out there, but they do exist. And that's why Catalyst Athletics has been successful, is because I focus all of my energy on creating good content and basically just crossing my fingers that there are enough people out there who will recognize and appreciate that to pay our bills.
Right.
And that so far has been true. And so, yeah, we could be making a lot more money if I wanted to do all this kind of sleazy marketing sort of stuff, but I don't. Mm-hmm. And so the way I look at it is that, really you can be a creator or you can be a marketer. And a creator can do some marketing, a marketer can do some creating, but you're really one or the other at the end of the day. The marketer is going to make more money, but the creator is going to actually earn respect and be able to live with themselves. And so I would much rather be someone who is proud of what I'm doing, who's putting out content that's actually useful and helpful and is helping people improve and make less money, than just do anything I possibly can to make some money, and not really give a shit whether or not it helps people or if it's any good or if I'm being totally disingenuous about who I am and what I'm doing.
Right. I have a couple thoughts on that. My first is, you mentioned that your focus is putting out as much quality content as possible. And one thing that you're not explicitly mentioning, but what Catalyst is and has always been so good at, is giving away such high quality shit for free. You were doing that probably before you necessarily even had to, but nowadays there are fucking 1,000 blogs and video YouTube channels, etc. If you're not giving away information for free from someone, they're not gonna. How does someone know to trust you? So what you've done, you've given away free programs, like dozens of free programs, a video library, articles, all of that kind of stuff. And for those of you out there that you want to make this a career, you don't have to do all of it, and certainly not at once, but pick a medium, whether it be writing articles or a book or an ebook or videos, whatever it may be, but just start to educate people and try to provide value for people for free. And that's called content marketing, and it's the most fulfilling way to kind of get your message out there, because if they don't buy it from you, at least you're giving them something valuable. And it's just good to kind of hone your skill and fine tune your craft, because even if you're writing, it's a different form of learning for you. So I highly recommend that form of marketing for anybody listening.
Yeah, and I mean, the way I look at Catalyst is we give away all this information, and to the point where I get an email or talk to someone probably once a week who's like, why do you give this all away for free? You could be making so much money. And the way I look at it is, again, the driving force is that we want to help people and educate people. That's the whole reason that I created Catalyst Athletics in the first place. It wasn't to make money. I like making money because then I can do this full time. I don't have to have another job, which is great. But I figure that if we put out good stuff, people like it, they appreciate it, then in return, they're going to help me out and buy a book or buy a video, buy a t-shirt. And to me, that's almost like, it's like a donation. Like, wow, I really appreciate what you're doing. Yep. Here's $40, here's $20 to help you keep doing this. And, then, you get the people who are just pissed off at the world, and, anything that isn't free, they feel like you're some kind of horrible person, and you're like, you just need to go to prison. And it's like, you know what, you better stop and thank all these people who actually are willing to give up a few bucks to let people like you get all this stuff for free. And it's amazing to me. Again, it's that sense of entitlement. Like, people don't understand that, how much work goes into running a website or a business like Catalyst Athletics. They think all this stuff just kind of like spontaneously materializes. Like, oh, wow, there's a huge video library. That's cool. It should be free, of course, because it's digital. It's like, well, yeah, but someone is me, had to make this stuff. Like, it takes work. It takes knowledge. It takes time. And so it's always so bizarre to me where, the same person who will be I've seen people so upset. just fucking livid over having to pay like $5 for something. And you go, okay, well, let's say that, your boss at work said, hey, you're getting $5 less every 2 weeks on your paycheck. You think they'd be okay with that? Of course not. They'd fucking lose their minds. And so it's so bizarre to me that there's that weird disconnect where people just can't put that together. Like, wow, this is like actual stuff that someone had to create. Therefore, it has value. Like, I value it because I want it, yet I'm not willing to give a penny for it. It's very strange to me.
But you're just a business on the interwebs. You're not a real human being, Greg.
No, it's true. All this stuff is just free because it's digital.
Right. Oh,
or like people who are like, oh, well, why does a Kindle book, cost so much money? It's digital. It's like, well, yeah, it's still content.
Right.
Like, it's not.
It took thousands of man
you
hours.
pay money, to watch a movie just because it's on film. It's not like a physical product. Doesn't mean it didn't cost money and take time and effort to create. It's fucking crazy.
Right. A couple more and let's wrap it up. You and Amy.
Get me on to something positive because I sound like a dick right now.
No, man, this is phenomenal. You and Amy work together a little bit, and Dee and I are kind of starting to do the same more and more. And I think it's very common in the fitness, the weightlifting, CrossFit space, especially if you own a gym for couples to work together. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for working together. What's helped you guys to do that? Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
What's made you guys as productive as possible in that relationship, and B, how have you made it as healthy and fulfilling for your marriage as possible?
Well, I think that's a complicated thing, but I would say primarily going into anything as a couple, especially business related, there has to be a very clear set of expectations for each person. In other words, it's just like going into any contract or anything. It has to be spelled out. This is what party A and party B is responsible for. These are the expectations, period. There's no, there's perfect clarity on everything. Everybody's fine. If you go into it and one person is expecting the other to do all these things and that person doesn't do them, then there's all this resentment and you get pissed off at each other and like, why she's not carrying her weight or he's a lazy fucker and I'm doing everything. So if you lay that all out ahead of time, this is your job. This is my job. You avoid, so much of those problems. And part of it too is that you kind of have to rely on, you have to, each person has to do what they're good at doing.
Right.
You can't have one person who gets to like do all the fun stuff and the other person gets screwed. Like, okay, well, I get to coach and do this and you clean the bathrooms. That's never going to work out unless someone really likes cleaning bathrooms. I don't know. Who am I to say that's not an enjoyable thing for anybody, but
right.
I get a sense of pleasure out of cleaning things, just not toilets. And so I think that's the number one thing is having those really clear expectations, very clear kind of job outlines, or job descriptions for each person. And then understanding too that there does still have to be in some degree of independence. Any two people, you have to kind of have time and space to do your own thing, be your own individual versus just being part of this unit. And I think a lot of people lose that. And, Amy and I have worked together for a long time, but we have separate offices. In the last gym we had, our offices were literally on opposite ends of the gym, so it was fantastic. We didn't have to see each other if we didn't want to. We had to call each other and things like that. And now our offices are right next to each other in the house, but they're still separate, and we kind of work at different times, and we do totally different things. So there's no stepping on toes, and I know what she's going to do. She knows what I'm going to do. So that there's no real confusion there. I don't know that I have any other advice besides that.
No,
make sure. Well, I think the number one, forget all that stuff. Number one is you got to be with the right person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like no relationship is going to work if you have two people who can't get along in general. You know what I mean? Like you have to have a good relationship going into a business situation to expect that business situation to work well. If you're already fighting all day long and you hate each other's guts, owning a business together is probably not going to work those things out for you.
Absolutely not. Yeah, Dee and I are we're kind of tiptoeing into it. Like we both have very successful companies, and we don't want to fuck it up, but we also see some huge potential in terms of just like kind of what you said, like people they need to be in their own lanes and do what they're good at, and me and Adi are good at very different things. So I think if couples learn to really work together, give each other some independence, but also learn how to come together for different projects, I think there's a lot to that. And obviously every couple is different, and it's not going to work for everyone. So you got to find a way to find the synergy in the things, in that combination, versus having one thing depend on the other, or like right.
be an anchor dragging the other down.
Right. Thank you. That was helpful. Okay, let's wrap it up. Of all the free shit on your website, what are the 3 most valuable things you think people should go download right now?
The exercise video library is probably where we get the most traffic, just because it's very thorough. It's very awesome. It's weightlifting specific, so you have a lot of the obscure weightlifting exercises.
Yeah. And for people wondering, they give full explanations of like how to execute different cues and all this different shit on every exercise you can imagine.
Each video has, each exercise has a video demonstrating it, usually with multiple lifters, and it's with maybe a couple exceptions, it's all exercises being done in the course of training by a real lifter, not just like weird, empty bar, quick demo kind of stuff. But then each one has a full write-up that has, how to do it. It has how to incorporate it into a program, variations, other notes on it. So there's a ton of information there. Basically, each one is like a short article in and of itself. And I think there's like almost 300 exercises in there. So that's the number one. Number 2, I think, would be the programs and the workouts. We have I don't even know how many let me see here. I think we've got something like 40 programs. Full programs, as long as 12 to 16 weeks. We have short ones too, 4 to 6 weeks for people who need something like that. All kinds of different things. Each one explains what it is, what it's for, different characteristics, like if it's got high volume, moderate volume, whatever.
Right.
And so I think we've got 13 of them that are still totally free, plus the daily workout, which is whatever the current program is free. You just have to create an account. And then if you want access to all of them, you can have a premium account, which is $10 a month. I think just about anyone out there can swing that. That's 2 fewer trips to Starbucks for your $18 fucking lattes that have an eyedropper full of coffee, and the rest is just milk and whipped cream and shit. But seriously, drink whatever you like, and I won't make fun of you. And then the third one would be the articles. We have 300 something articles in there, basically 10 years worth of articles, primarily from me, but also from other people. And so there's everything from, technique stuff to programming stuff to, the mental aspects of lifting and athletics in general. And the good thing about our website is everything is organized and easy to find. Every section you can search for something. You can, select by category, by date, by author, all these different things. So it makes it very easy.
And it's pretty. It's clean.
To locate.
It's
quite pretty,
nice,
if I do say so.
Very nice website. Awesome.
And it's mobile friendly for all you guys who hate computers and only use your phones.
Which are most.
Yeah.
What about your seminars? Tell us about those. How can people look into that?
Yes. So this is year 11 of seminars for me, starting in 2007 or 17, excuse me. CatalystAthletics.com / Olympic weightlifting seminars, or of course you can just go to our website and there's a button that says seminars right at the top. And that'll give you the schedule. We have a bunch of international ones next year, a handful of U.S. ones. I'll be doing all the U.S. ones myself, and which I don't do a lot of them myself anymore. So if you've been waiting to go do a seminar with me personally, so you can come enjoy my incredible humor and good looks and whatever, get in on that. Las Vegas, St. Louis, Miami, I think are the ones that I'll be doing next year. And then of course we'll be New Zealand, Iceland, Canada, England, and Italy so far. So you can go check that out. We do discounts for 3 or more people. We have CEUs for the NSCA, ACSM, and NASM. We've got all kinds of stuff. You can get certified as a coach through us, or you can just go to the seminar just to get better as an athlete, as a coach. So we pretty much do it all.
Fucking A, brother. It's awesome. All right, guys, go check it all out. Greg, where can they find you on social media? Is it at Cathletics?
Instagram is at Catalyst Athletics.
Okay.
Twitter is at Cathletics, and Facebook is Catalyst PM, as in performance menu.
Awesome. Cool, man. Thank you so much for your time, bro. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, Greg. Bye.